here at the state park, and I'd like to welcome you all. If you're joining me for the first time, we have a lot in store for you. There's all these wonderful opportunities to connect with state parks throughout California in these coming weeks. And we are offering programs for everyone that's in school learning from K through 12. So like Jennifer said, we have this program for 9, 10, 11, and 12th graders. Welcome. I'm standing at the Neptune pool. This pool is part of Hearst Castle, which is the former home of William Randolph Hearst. He was a newspaper publisher. So if you were alive about 100 years ago, where would you get your news? Probably from one of his newspapers. He had over 28 of them across the United States. He even had a little division over there across the Atlantic in the UK as well. He built his dream home on his family's ranch. Starting about 100 years ago, we are celebrating our centennial. So I've got this button where we are commemorating this relationship between William Randolph Hearst and his architect, California-based architect Julia Morgan. They would spend 28 years building his dream home on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean. We're going to see some gorgeous views today. And they never finished. But of course, a lot got done, because as you can see, I'm standing by this beautiful pool. Now, he lived between 1863 and 1951. After his death, his family would continue to use this estate that we call Hearst Castle today for several years. They knew it was a special place. Hearst was prominent in history, and he was also an art collector. We're going to see a lot of that collection today. They knew it was a special place. It's grand, it's big, it's a lot to take care of, actually. So they donated it to California State Parks in 1958. So we have been giving tours for over 60 years. We are closed to the public. It's pretty quiet around here. I actually miss seeing a lot of people from all over the world. We get over 500,000 visitors a year coming from every part of the globe, coming to tour, look at the art, take pictures, enjoy the views, enjoy the outdoors and the inside of the house. So I'm missing you all right now, and I'm glad to be connecting with you. So let's take a look at this pool. I'm going to flip the camera around here. Oh, gorgeous view of the Pacific Ocean. We're 1,600 feet above sea level, standing under a, let's see, here we go, colonnade. The colonnade is a row of columns like we have. What style of architecture does this look like to you? If you want to go ahead and type in the feature, we'll get some answers. And then maybe Jennifer can share them. Yeah. Where have you seen this style of architecture before?
We've got Tyler coming in real quick with Greek.
Absolutely, Tyler. What gave it away? All the columns, perhaps? Greek architecture. Do you recognize this architecture in buildings in your hometown or other places in the United States, even across the world?
Yeah, I will say really quick that Ryan chimed in and said that what gave it away are the columns and the statues.
Absolutely. Yeah, marble statues. This is marble columns right here. These columns were carved and made for this pool in the 1930s. So different parts of the hilltop, I call it a hilltop. I have to let you in on this jargon here for a moment, because this home was built on top of a hill 1,600 feet overlooking the ocean. We oftentimes call it a hilltop. Do we have any other answers for what style of architecture does this look like? Where have you seen this before? Have you seen it in your hometown?
I'm
Do
not
we have
gonna-
anybody? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I haven't got any hometown answers, but someone did say something about Roman.
Absolutely. The Greeks were known for columns. The ancient Greeks living over 2,000 years ago, when the Roman civilization would rise, they would actually borrow a lot of the ideas of the Greeks and recreate them. So oftentimes we can refer to this as Greek architecture or Roman architecture. These columns are made out of granite, and some of them are nearly 2,000 years old. And when I spoke about Mr. Hearst being an art collector earlier, oftentimes we think of art as being paintings and sculptures and tapestry, but if we can think beyond that to pieces of buildings from antiquity, like granite columns that used to be on some sort of temple or government building or home or villa of an ancient Roman, since these columns are nearly 2,000 years old.
Tracy, we did get a couple of comments regarding your question, and the answers were the Capitol buildings, courthouses, church, the Getty Center. So those were a few of the answers.
Oh, that's awesome. That is absolutely correct. So why are people still building in this Greek and Roman style? And that's what I was looking for, because all over the US Capitol, Washington, D.C., at the Capitol building, the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, you're going to see a lot of this style of architecture, columns, even a pediment. That's the triangular piece on top of the temple. Within that pediment, oftentimes you will find a statuary group. And this group is Neptune and two sea nereids. Sea nereids are goddesses of the ocean, representing, sand and sea and salt water. They're your goddesses if you like to go surfing or kayaking, going out fishing in a boat. This trio, the two sea goddesses and Neptune, are 400 years old. They're part of the art collection. Neptune is, you all know probably, he is the Roman god of the, ta-da, water, overlooking 345,000 gallons of water. We get our water from the hills back here. We use back in the 20s, the architect would build a system where the water dropped down from a higher elevation from mountain springs in the mountains using gravity. So no pumps were required, and they would make their way to the hilltop here. So that's what feeds this pool. This pool is lined with marble, and this dark green around the pool that gives it this outline, California State Rock. So a good piece of trivia for y'all. California State Rock is serpentine. It's a really dark green. And if you notice this pattern in the center of the pool, that's really old as well. That it's over 2,000 years old, coming from the Greek civilization. It's called the Greek key pattern, or the meander pattern. You can see how it meanders around, never stopping. And that is something you might recognize. Look around your room that you're in, your living room, your house. Do you notice any similarities, even in your own home, to the Greek and the Roman style? We're going to see how the ancient civilizations, the Greeks and the Romans, how their art influenced the history of humanity. So I've got a lot in store for you today. We're actually going to walk around the state park. We're going to meet some of my friends, fellow tour guides. Before we leave the pool, Jennifer, do we have any questions?
Did the materials come from Greece?
That's a really good question. So the colonnade that I'm standing under, all these columns came from a quarry in Vermont. Oftentimes marble will come from Italy and Greece, but the columns and the tile in the pool are all from Vermont. So a little shout out to Vermont. These columns are granite, and those, again, those would come from the 2,000 years ago almost, somewhere in the Roman Empire. When Mr. Hearst bought them, he purchased them from an art dealer in Rome.
And someone would like to know, does the Hearst family still use the pool in the house?
The Hearst family, they still come and visit, and they take tours, and they do swim in the pool from time to time. They have events up here. No one spends the night in the house anymore. We're going to see that house in a little bit, by the way, what we call Hearst Castle. But he also built 3 cottages. And we're going to go check out one of these cottages right now. Oh, look at that. The water is so blue out there. We're seeing some of these Canary Island palm trees. Let's see, it's almost about 60 degrees. We've got a light wind. By the way, the air temperature is about the same as the water temperature of the Neptune pool. Fun fact. This is the West Terrace that we're going out to. Overlooks the Hearst Ranch. So William Randolph Hearst, when he was 57, he would decide to build his dream home on the family ranch. His father started buying the land in 1865. Give you a little view. There we go. So we were talking about how Greek and Roman art would influence human history and how we see it keep popping up throughout history. You already talked about seeing it in your hometown, maybe at a post office, seeing it on famous Washington, D.C. buildings. We got my friend Amber right here. She's going to tell us a little bit about, hi, Amber, how are you today?
I'm very well. How are you, Tracy? Can everybody hear me?
I think they can.
Okay.
So where are we? What is this house? This is not Hearst Castle, is it?
No, this is not the main house. This is one of the guest houses. The guest houses are what they started building in 1920. This is the 100-year anniversary of when they began construction here. So we're celebrating that right now. But before they even began pouring concrete, the first thing Mr. Hearst purchased for this property were plants for the garden. So I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective on the art and architecture along with the gardens here. And I'm going to direct your attention first to the top of that fountain behind me. Can you see what's at the top of that fountain?
We can see it.
You can see it. So the architectural style that Mr. Hearst and his architect, Julia Morgan, decided on is something called Southern Mediterranean Renaissance. And that is a Renaissance statue. It's called the Statue of David. It was done by a very famous Renaissance artist in Italy named Donatello. Donatello, this is probably his most famous work, and it is the first freestanding nude statue that had been created since antiquity, the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans. It may even be the first Renaissance statue created. And because it's so famous and important, the original sculpture is in a museum in Italy. And Mr. Hearst, he couldn't purchase the original sculpture, so he was able to purchase a copy of it, which is standing on top of that fountain. Now he's standing on top of that fountain like he just won an Olympic gold medal. But what David has actually done is he went out and he slew the giant warrior Goliath. So he's standing there very confidently with his foot on Goliath's head, taking in the view that you just saw out to the ocean there. This is Casa del Sol, called House of the Sun. It has sunset views in the evening. So Renaissance style was a very important influence here, but Casa del Sol actually has a different style that I want to talk about, and that is a Spanish Moorish style. Mr. Hearst wanted to differentiate it a little bit from the other two guest houses, so we see more Moorish influence. Now, the Moors came from Persia into Spain and North Africa. They invaded in the early 1700s, and they became a dominant Islamic population there until about 1500. So they were bringing a lot of their Islamic architectural influence with them. Now, even the original concept of a garden came from Persia, which was originally a lot of green plants, and the color was added in the way of glazed ceramic tile. So if you can look at the whole fountain behind me. So this is copied again from a Spanish Moorish design. This is a typical fountain that would be seen in Spanish gardens. And that glazed ceramic tile work, you see that all the way around the basin here and along the sides of the stair. Kind of a geometric design, which was typical in Islamic designs, and also has sort of a flavor of maybe Arabic writing that they were trying to imitate. So Julia Morgan incorporated a lot of these glazed ceramic tiles into the art and architecture for the gardens here. Now, we're going to go up behind this fountain, and we're going to see some more sculptures very suited to a garden environment.
Awesome. Can we take a closer look at one of these Spanish tiles?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So as you can see, they are on the stairs. It's called stair risers, and they rise all the way up. There's all kinds of treasures here at Hearst Castle. There's something to see and ponder around every corner. Here's the base of that fountain and these glazed Spanish tiles that Amber's talking about. And she spoke about this being typical, something you would see in Spain, like the lions. There we go, all the way up to the statue of Donatello's David. This one was done in 1920s when Mr. Hearst purchased it, but the original was done during the Renaissance time period in Florence, Italy in the 1400s. And here we have more sculpture.
Tracy, can I interrupt? We have a question from Haley. She wanted to know, is there ever water in the fountain?
Oh, yes. The fountains normally run, because we're closed for tours right now, we're trying to conserve some of that water, so we haven't had the fountains turned on, but normally, yes, there would be water flowing. And if you think about what people put in gardens, water features like ponds, fountains, maybe you have a bird bath in your backyard garden. These fountains make excellent bird baths for our native birds up here. All right, so I think what we're looking at here is a marble sculpture. Now, this is a 1920s Art Deco style. So these sculptures that we're going to see now, these are contemporary to Mr. Hearst. During the time he was building, he purchased these directly from the artists. This is called the Roses, and you can see she's gathered a bunch of roses that she's clutching very tightly there. This is by an artist named Denis Puch. He was French, and this is dated 1929. Now let's come over to the other side here. It has a companion. Another sculpture by Denis Puch. This is dated 1931. Again, Art Deco style. This is the Lilies. Again, gathering a bouquet of lilies close up against her. Now this echoes the way that these green vines sort of hug the building behind them and frame these sculptures. These vines are a combination of red trumpet vine and bougainvillea. Now, bougainvillea is very commonly associated with Mediterranean architecture, and Mr. Hearst wanted a lot of bougainvillea to decorate the plain walls of the guest houses here. And these are not blooming right now. They've been trimmed back so that they'll bloom vibrantly in summer. But really the dominant color, remember, gardens coming from Persia into Spain, the dominant color was always green, and Mr. Hearst wanted greenery year round. He didn't like to see scraggly plants and trees without their leaves during winter. He wanted things to be green and vibrant here. Now, in the center, between these symmetrically placed marble sculptures, we have a bronze sculpture. This is by an English artist named Arthur George Walker. This was done in 1925, again, contemporary to Mr. Hearst. This is Adam and Eve, and he originally displayed this sculpture under the title, "And They Were Afraid." If you remember the story of Adam and Eve, they lived in a garden. All of these sculptures are very appropriate in a garden space, featuring flowers, featuring characters from a story where they lived in a garden and then they were kicked out of that garden. So when you look at them here under the arch of greenery, are they exiting one garden to enter another? That's the kind of imagery that has been created here. So that's going to conclude my presentation. Any last quick questions?
Jennifer, do we have any questions for Amber about the statues or the garden?
Yeah, we've got some questions about the statues. Kenneth wants to know what is the inspiration for some of these statues?
What is the inspiration? That's a very good question, and it's hard to read the minds of the artists who created these sculptures, but you're looking at classic characters from biblical stories, Adam and Eve, that would have been a very popular subject. You're looking at, very classic nude figures, sort of going back to antiquity, that classical nude figure, along with, something beautiful and floral with the flowers. So, art is representing a form of beauty in that way.
Merritt would like to know how many sculptures there are, and I'm assuming how many there are there at the castle is the question.
Oh, total sculptures? I don't have an exact number for you. I think you're going to take a walk through some more of the gardens. Tracy might show you some more of the sculptures in the gardens, and you can see how well they're suited to the outdoor environment with, they might feature a plant or an animal or a figure that belongs outdoors. And you can try and count how many more sculptures you see along the way.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you,
We're
Amber.
going to walk through those gardens now. Let's see. So we're leaving Casa del Sol, which has views of the sunset right over there over the Pacific Ocean. Let's head up these stairs. I want to share a quick photo of William Randolph Hearst for you so you can see who we've been talking about. Who's the person that is collecting art? Who is the person that's asking artists to create these statues for his gardens? And another name for that could be a patron of the arts. Someone who is supporting this. He was an eclectic collector. As we've seen, he's purchased 2,000-year-old columns for his pool. When he can't get the original statue, like the original Donatello's David, who was a shepherd in biblical times, the Old Testament, and he defeats Goliath, Mr. Hearst will just have a copy made. So he's collecting art. He's running a media empire with newspapers and magazines and radio stations, and he's also building his dream home. Lots of greenery in the gardens.
Tracy, Tasha wants to know, how long did it take to build the whole thing from start to finish?
We can start to see some of the house we call Hearst Castle. They started in 1920 and went to 1948, basically. And there's still many parts that are unfinished. We've got a statue of the Crouching Venus coming up, marble. Made sometime in the 18 or 1900s, but based off of ancient mythology from the Greeks and the Romans. So there's many times throughout history where an artist will look back to these classical ideas of the ancient civilizations and recreate them. One of the biggest times was the Renaissance. That was when the original Donatello's David was made. This little pathway is called the Esplanade. and it wraps all the way around the hilltop, full circle. And it's a great way to walk around and view the gardens and see the buildings. And what we're looking at here are the three Graces. These are the daughters of Zeus. This sculpture was created in the 1800s, yet the subject matter is ancient civilizations and mythology. So again, we'll keep seeing that come up as inspiration for some of these creations that we see. This is a Roman sarcophagus. It's actually, it was sold to Hearst as being from the 1st century AD. A sarcophagus is an ancient Roman coffin, though art historians from our current time period think it's a forgery. But he does have 9 sarcophagi on the hilltop. Most of them are from the ancient civilizations. So a lot of them are around 1800 years old, and this one is, again, thought to be a forgery. And as I turn around here, I'm standing in front of yet another cottage. We met Amber in front of Casa del Sol. This one is Casa Del Mar House of the Sea. It's named for its views of the ocean. We do have some flowers in bloom, camellias. Now, when Mr. Hearst first started building up here, he started with the cottages because they were much smaller than the castle itself. We'll see how big that is. Now, this is still 3 floors. Many bedrooms, bathrooms, sitting rooms, a huge door. There we go. Let's see what we have inside. Oh, it's beautiful. So I spoke about how the Renaissance was inspired by classical art and thought. And we saw some architecture from the classical time period, the Greeks and the Romans. And we saw Donatello's David. Of course, Mr. Hearst's was a copy, but the original was done in the 1400s during the Renaissance in Florence, Italy. And then we come into a room. We're gonna find it's a little dark, so let me face. Oh, well, hello.
Hey, welcome, guys.
This room has a Renaissance interior where it was quite fancy, ornate, elaborate. There's a lot of plaster work and wood carving and gold leaf. And here's my friend Elaine.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elaine.
Welcome to Casa Del Mar. So Tracy already spoke to you about the Renaissance, and Renaissance meaning it's kind of a revival. And during the 1400s, 1600s, it was a revival of kind of Greek philosophy, literature, and art. So they were kind of drawing from the old and making it new again, which is something we kind of do today. If you think about it, nowadays there's a renaissance of the 80s and 90s, right? They're remaking 80s movies. They're drawing from 80s inspiration to make like Stranger Things, that kind of thing. So it's, you know, it's still way back. We still do it today. And a lot of the ways that the Renaissance came about is because this was around the time there was now a middle class. And before, a lot of the art that was being done was being commissioned by the churches, because really only the church kind of had the money to commission art pieces. But in the Renaissance, there's kind of a middle class coming around. Particularly, a big part of the Renaissance was the Medici family. They're a banking family. They made their wealth off commerce and banking. And they kind of took this extra money and put it a lot towards the art and the artists in the area. They weren't just throwing money, though. They kind of had a vision. They wanted the art to represent education. They wanted it to educate and represent the very best of human beings and the best of the state and the best of leadership. And this is really when the great artists came around, like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Caravaggio. And the reason for that is because they had more freedom. They weren't just making art for the church. They now had more freedom to explore different topics. And this is where techniques like lighting, perspective, light and shadow really come into play. And there's kind of this overflow of creativity because they have so much freedom. And so how you can really tell what Renaissance is, especially like in paintings, I'll show you, there's a painting here right behind me. This is the Madonna and Child with the two angels. This is 16th century, it's Flemish. Aren't sure about the artist, maybe William Benson, and he was a follower of Rembrandt. And a big thing in the Renaissance was they would use animals in it, not just to make it look cute, but also animals represented a narrative. It kind of helped tell a story, and they symbolized a lot of things, particularly birds. Birds represented sacrifice, it represented the soul, it represented rebirth and resurrection and death. So when you see a bird in a Renaissance painting, it represents something more than just being a pretty bird in a painting. So an example of this, it's kind of hard to see.
We've got a bird there, don't we?
We've got two.
Okay, let's get a little closer.
Let's get a little closer to the baby Jesus. Baby Jesus is holding a parrot. And in this particular painting, the parrot represents the Annunciation of the Virgin. So maybe a new soul, right? She was being told that she was going to be the mother of Jesus Christ, or the Son of God. And also another bird here is the goldfinch, right there, sitting on the heart. You see that, Tracy?
There we go. Yeah, I had a glare. I had to move out from the glare. Okay, we see it.
Yes, and so the goldfinch represented the crucifixion of Christ, so death and eventually resurrection. So animals were used a lot to represent different things in the Renaissance area. Another thing I want to point out is the Madonna and Child itself. Now, before, when it was primarily the church doing these paintings, the Madonna and Child were almost kind of abstract. The Madonna usually was very flat. There was not a whole lot of humanity towards her, but during the Renaissance, Madonna starts looking more like an actual person, a young mother. You could see this kind of, something that you can relate to. You could definitely see a young mother like this, like waiting in line at a Starbucks. That's totally possible, right? She looks like a pumpkin spice kind of gal. And that was because in the Renaissance, they wanted to depict things as they were seen. So they wanted to be more human-like and more relatable. That's why the Madonna during the Renaissance looks more like a young mother. Now let's get to baby Jesus. That's another thing. You could definitely tell the difference before Renaissance and after the Renaissance. Before the Renaissance, Jesus looked like a little man.
He looked like an old man.
An old man, like he had bills to pay. He was stuck in traffic all the time.
Kind of a stressed out one.
And this stressed out one, receding hairline, some of them. And that was something called homunculus. And that literally means little man. And they wanted to depict Jesus as somebody that came out as a, very perfect, already like somebody that had a lot of wisdom. And so that's why they showed him as a little man, as if Jesus came out of the womb as a 30-something man right from the get-go. But in the Renaissance, Jesus starts looking like a cute, chubby baby again. I mean, he kind of still looks like a guy.
So you're saying in the Middle Ages, medieval art depicts Jesus like a wise old man.
Correct.
And now we have a more realistic approach during the Renaissance. Exactly. Where Mary looks like someone that could, like you said, walk in a Starbucks today and get a pumpkin spice latte.
Pumpkin spice. And same with Jesus. Jesus has baby rolls now. Jesus looks like a baby. And not only because they were trying to depict reality, but also remember, there's private patrons now. So the private patrons don't want their babies to look like, Uncle Ron. They want their babies to be cute. They want it to look chubby. So that's how you really know that a Renaissance painting is a Renaissance painting. The babies are chubby again, and baby Jesus actually looks like a baby Jesus. But in general, Renaissance, they want to depict beauty, wisdom, and the truth. That was kind of the overall theme of the Renaissance. And when you guys come to the Hearst Castle, that's kind of what you're surrounded with, is beauty, wisdom, and truth.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What do y'all think? Do you have any questions for Elaine?
There's definitely some questions.
Yes.
Yeah, so Gianni would like to know who made this painting again, and Laura would also like to know how old is this painting?
So 16th century painting was done by an artist. We don't know for sure. Originally, Mr. Hearst bought it